For special coverage on this very topic is Keith Preston, independent journalist and researcher, joining us from Richmond, and Ramiro Fuentes, co-editor at Anticonquista, joining us from Los Angeles, California. Gentlemen, pleasure to have you both on. I guess, Keith, we'll start with you. How do you characterize Donald Trump's United States?
Well, Donald Trump's tenure as president of the United States has been rather unremarkable in many ways. If we look at what he actually accomplished as president of the United States, he actually did not accomplish a great deal. The executive orders that Mr. Biden has issued so far that you mentioned earlier in your report are largely efforts to undo executive orders that President Trump enacted during his own tenure, and virtually anything that Trump did, he did through executive orders. In terms of legislative achievements, he really achieved practically nothing other than some selective tax cuts fairly early on in his administration, and something that the Republican was enthusiastic about. But other than that, his presidency has been marred mostly by ongoing controversy, and certainly it's been a very eventful presidency in the sense of the daily drama that would go on, whether it was two impeachment proceedings or whether it was the constant scandals involving individuals in his administration and their legal difficulties and things of that nature, or whether it was simply the day-to-day controversies involving everything from tweets to name-calling to the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. So there's really not a lot to assess in that regard. The President, Trump, really did not govern much differently than the Republican would have. There was nothing about him that really stood out in any significant way. I do think that he was more subservient to Israel and Saudi Arabia than virtually any U.S. president in the past has been. For example, moving the capital to Jerusalem, moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, this agreement that he's put together between Israel and the countries of the Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and so he has been extremely subservient to those interests, which are heavily embedded in his own party, in the Republican Party. But other than that, he largely allowed standard Republican functionaries and operatives to for him. He didn't really break with norms with behavioral. So he's actually been a very mediocre and lackluster president in terms of accomplishments.
All right, let me swing over to Ramiro, and welcome to the program. Ramiro Fuentes, always a pleasure to have you on. Now, Ramiro, how do you expect Joe Biden from today on to differ from Donald Trump, and how do you expect him not to?
Joe Biden is entering office with a mess of problems. The U.S. economy is on the brink of collapse. There are military bases around the world that are unwanted by sovereign nations. COVID-19 is killing thousands of people in the United States. Biden has a lot to do. Most pro-imperialist side of the United States that took pride in showing strength against countries around the world that are defending themselves. Let's not forget that Trump attacked Iran and was responsible for killing General Soleimani. Trump also tried to invade Venezuela on several times with armed mercenaries. And he represented this hard faction, this hardcore attempt to overthrow nations abroad. Biden is going to switch things up. Biden is going to bring in soft power. We see already that the Biden administration is talking about ramping up more sanctions on Venezuela. He had one of the key people of the Venezuelan opposition, an illegal government to the democratically elected government, giving him an award in Washington. And what we're going to see is more NGOs, more color revolution style regime change operations. The head of the USAID, the Agency for International Development, which is one of the organizations carrying out this color revolution liberal imperialism is Samantha Powers. And Samantha Powers is one of the individuals responsible for invading Libya, creating a whole marketing campaign around it to portray it as a revolution when it was just complete chaos.
Ramiro, I want both you and Keith to hold on a second. We're live there in Washington to see the White House. That was Jen Psaki, the new White House press secretary for U.S. President Joe Biden, saying she's actually initially going through details of Joe Biden's many executive orders, 17 to be exact, up until this point. He's been very quick with the pen to try to undo some of what he sees as some of the damage left from the Trump administration. And Jen Psaki also vowed to stay honest and transparent. We're going to continue back with our extended coverage with Keith Preston, independent journalist, joining us from Richmond, and Ramiro Fuentes, co-editor Conquista out of Los Angeles. Keith, I'm going to swing back over to you now. So obviously there's going to be some change on the horizon. You see this new White House. You've known Joe Biden for quite some time. You've known Donald Trump. What kind of change do you see taking place?
Well, I think the main thing that Biden is going to be emphasizing right out of the gate is essentially turning back the clock, and that is, I think he wants to go back and turn the clock back to where it was in 2017, in January 2017, when President Obama left office. I think essentially what he's trying to do at this point is simply erase the Trump administration and more or less pretend like it never happened and say, okay, let's get back on track. Let's go back to where we were during the end of the Obama administration. And if you look at the executive orders that Mr. Biden has issued, if you look at what his policy preferences, proposals are, what his emphasis is going to be, it's quite clear that's how he sees his role. He looks at it like the past 4 years was an aberration, a deviation from what he considers to be the accepted norm in U.S. politics. And now what he's trying to do is set things back to normal, so to speak, and I think in a way that, in his own mind at least, unifies the country around what he considers to be more responsible leadership, which is himself. And I think that's really going to be the main focus early on. That is erasing the memory of the Trump administration, which I think much of our political leadership and certainly in the United States view as having been an embarrassment.
And Ramiro, it's funny that Keith, I'm glad he made that point, erasing the memory of the Trump administration. Well, guess what? The Trump administration did everything it could to erase the memory of the Obama administration, which brings us till today. 17 executive orders in this guy's first couple hours in office. My question to you, isn't that inherently inefficient if this becomes a precedent now where each U.S. president comes into office and hits a reset on everything his predecessor did because he didn't agree with it? How does policy ever really develop? How does it mature? How does it evolve if we're going to hit reset? He hit Trump hit the reset on Obama. And now basically Trump's getting the button being hit on him. And maybe justifiably so. I'm against, many of us are against racial inequalities and whatever. We all love the environment. And so a lot of it is justified. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying as far as this executive order procedure, do you see the inherent inefficiencies in it, Ramiro?
Yes, this is extremely inefficient. I think what we're seeing now is the ideological fallacy of U.S. quote-unquote democracy and republicanism coming to the fore. The United States has this arrogant and very imperialist mindset that in order for a country to be, quote, free and democratic, you need a change of office every 4 years. You need a new leader, a new party. These two same parties that are just passing the ball back and forth to each other. It's like two friends going out to dinner and there's a huge bill, no one can pay for it, and they just keep passing it back and forth to each other and making fake promises. There's a crisis going on. The fact that the U.S. economy, we went from austerity and crackdowns and cutbacks under Trump to more social programs, but now we also have the threat of more invasions abroad. And so there's chaos going on in the U.S. on all levels, financial, political, and I think it goes to show how unstable the U.S. system is, because let's compare the U.S., for example, to China. Recently, there were some statistics that came out that the U.S. economy contracted during COVID-19 while China continued to expand and grow. So over there, they have a centrally planned government. with one vision and one goal, and it's not the same as the U.S. model of back and forth. And I think we're able to see now around the countries around the world that have a more stable government, that have a more ideological revolution, like Iran, like China, like Venezuela. They're able to create 5-year plans, 10-year plans, 15-year plans, and continue to grow and build. And we're seeing that manifest today with all of these back and forth rollbacks of executive orders. I think if another Republican comes into office, the same thing's going to happen again. They're going to roll back all of Biden's, and so it's just going to keep happening.
Right, Keith, and you want to weigh in on that, Keith? I mean, imagine right now, possibly Joe Biden for the next 4 or 8 years. We know he's big on green energy. Let's say he spends of taxpayer dollars to set up a deep infrastructure to support a switch over to lower, gas emissions and less greenhouse gases and whatnot. Try to catch up with the Paris Climate Accord quotas and whatnot. And let's say someone comes along and leaves all these projects and all this money to waste. Leaves it half done, scraps all this work, leaves these projects in ruin, come 4 or 8 years from now and opts out of the court again. Do you understand how that makes very little sense?
Yes, well, I think what that points to is something much broader that's going on in the United States, and that is the ongoing political polarization that we see. We certainly saw plenty of evidence of that in the most recent election. We see that in terms of virtually all the that's taken. For example, there was recently a poll conducted, I believe it was by CBS News, that indicated that 54% of Americans now view other Americans as the primary threat to the nation, more so than foreign enemies, more so than the virus, more so than environmental problems, more so than economic problems. So we're having a situation in the United States now where different political factions increasingly view each other as existential enemies. And that's being played out in the electoral politics. In this most recent election, we saw some increasingly extreme people getting elected to Congress, people associated with this QAnon cult, for example. Certainly, Donald Trump had been extremely polarizing. And in a society where there is this kind of extreme polarization and there's practically no agreement on policies of any kind, it's going to be more difficult for any administration to set in place a coherent set of policies that's going to endure over time, because like you said, their successor can simply come in and undo all of that. Now, there is a certain degree of continuity to U.S. policy on the highest levels. We do have a power elite in the United States that's concentrated in the intelligence services, the military, the nuclear sector, the major financial and industrial and technological sectors, who do have a collective assessment of their own interests internationally and economically. And the most significant policy and economic decisions tend to be decided by those people ultimately. But although even there we see fragmentation, we do see fragmentation even within the ranks of the elite increasingly in the United States, and that's being played out in their politics as well. So the more the United States fragments politically, culturally, internally, the more it is going to be difficult for the U.S. to maintain a sustainable set of policies about anything, whether it's international relations or economic policy or public health or the environment or anything else.
All right, we only have about 40 seconds left. Ramiro, I'll let you get your final thoughts, and go ahead, bud.
I just want people to walk away with the fact that even if Democrats are in power or Republicans, it's still the same capitalist two-party system running the U.S. We need a totally new system.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, both. Stay safe till we see both of you again. Always a pleasure to have you both on. Keith Preston, they're joining us from Richmond, and Ramiro Fuentes, they're joining us from Los Angeles, California. Viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of our special coverage here on the new U.S. President in office, Joe Biden. Pleasure to have you on. That's also done it for our World News Bulletin. Thanks for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.